The vulnerable society. In a far-off kingdom, nestled between towering mountains and deep, dark forests, there was a prosperous society called Aelden. The people of Aelden lived in a state of harmony and luxury, having long since conquered poverty, disease, and hunger. Their cities were adorned with magnificent architecture, their fields overflowed with crops, and their wealth was unmatched. However, beneath this veneer of prosperity, there was an underlying fragility. Over time, the citizens of Aelden had grown complacent, losing sight of the values that had built their thriving society. They relied heavily on their past achievements, believing that nothing could harm them and that their comfortable way of life would last forever. Unaware of how dependent they had become on external factors for their security and well-being, they failed to see that their society was becoming vulnerable, not to external threats, but from within. At the core of this vulnerability was a deep disconnection between the citizens. With their basic needs taken care of, they had little reason to engage with each other beyond surface-level interactions. They lived in isolation, consumed by their own individual desires and ambitions, trusting that their government, technology, and wealth would always protect them. The sense of community that had once been the backbone of Aelden's success began to erode. Elders in the kingdom warned that the foundation of their society was crumbling, but their voices were drowned out by the noise of progress and innovation. Our strength lies not in our wealth, but in our unity, they would say, but their words fell on deaf ears. The younger generations, born into comfort and security, saw no reason to listen, believing that the future would only bring more advancements and greater prosperity. Then, one fateful day, disaster struck. A series of unforeseen events, natural disasters, economic collapse, and political turmoil shook the very foundation of Aelden. The fields that had once overflowed with crops were ravaged by drought. The economy that had seemed unbreakable crumbled under the weight of greed and mismanagement, and the government, which had grown corrupt and self-serving, was unable to respond effectively to the crisis. The citizens, who had grown accustomed to relying on others to solve their problems, found themselves lost and powerless in the face of catastrophe. They looked around, hoping for someone to come to their aid, but the leaders they had entrusted with their security had fled or were too busy protecting their own interests. The people of Aelden were left vulnerable, not because of the strength of the external forces that attacked them, but because they had forgotten how to rely on each other and themselves. As the kingdom crumbled, the citizens of Aelden were forced to reckon with the consequences of their complacency. They realized that their vulnerability had been a result of their disconnection from one another. In times of peace and prosperity, they had forgotten the importance of community, trust, and mutual support. When faced with adversity, they had no foundation to stand on because they had spent years tearing it apart, brick by brick. The elders who had once been ignored were now seen as wise, but it was too late to undo the damage. The people of Aelden learned that a society's true strength lies not in its wealth or technological advancements, but in the bonds between its people. When those bonds are broken, the society becomes vulnerable to even the smallest of threats. The moral of the story is a timeless reminder of the importance of community and the dangers of complacency. A society that prioritizes individual success and wealth over collective well-being is doomed to become fragile, no matter how prosperous it may appear on the surface. The people of Aelden had all the resources they needed to thrive, but they lacked the most important element: unity. In times of peace, it is easy to forget that challenges and crises will inevitably come. The only way to weather such storms is by cultivating strong relationships and a sense of responsibility toward one another. Without this, even the most prosperous society is vulnerable to collapse. The vulnerable society serves as a warning that true strength lies not in material wealth or power, but in the connections between people and their willingness to support and care for one another. This story also teaches that progress and technology, while valuable, can become dangerous when they lead to isolation and disconnection. The people of Aelden relied too heavily on external systems to provide for their needs, forgetting that the true foundation of a society is its people. When those systems failed, they had no idea how to take care of themselves or each other. Their reliance on technology and wealth had made them weak, tenacious, unable to adapt to the challenges that arose. In our own world, as we continue to make advancements in technology and global economies, we must remember not to lose sight of the human connections that bind us together. Without those connections, we too may find ourselves vulnerable when the systems we rely on inevitably falter. Lastly, the story highlights the importance of listening to wisdom, especially from those who have lived through difficult times. The elders of Aelden had tried to warn the people of the dangers ahead, but their voices were drowned out by the noise of progress and ambition. In every society, there are those who can see the long-term consequences of current actions, but their warnings are often ignored in favor of short-term gains. True wisdom comes from understanding the balance between progress and preservation, between innovation and tradition. A society that values only what is new and dismisses the lessons of the past is bound to repeat the mistakes of those who came before.